My name is Chuck Jons. I grew up in northwest Iowa. My dad was a grocer up there, and so I started carrying out groceries when I was 6 or 7 years of age and kind of learned the mentality of treating people the way they need to be treated. Even way back then, I knew that I wanted to be a physician, and so as time passed and I graduated from high school, went down to the University of Iowa and eventually graduated down there from the College of Medicine. Did an internship down in Dallas, Texas, where I was working in a place where Kennedy got shot. And then I went out to Seattle and did a residency, especially in ear, nose, and throat. Uncle Sam caught up with me at that point, and I was drafted into the Air Force and sent to the Philippines. The Air Force at that time had a huge base in north of Manila called Clark Air Base, and I was the consulting surgeon and responsible for care for Air Force and Navy personnel, including Marines, from Taiwan, Korea, Southeast Asia, and obviously Vietnam. And was there for 2 years. The last 6 months of that 2 years, they were pulling forces out, and so I got stationed in Vietnam for the last 6 months, working in a triage unit, taking care of casualties, both for Americans and for Cambodians that were supporting us. And then I got sent home, so I thought maybe I was going to go back to the state of Washington to practice, and in those 2 years, I changed my mind, decided to come back home. Ames was close enough that I didn't have to waste vacation time seeing my own parents and in-laws, but far enough away they weren't on my doorstep every night. So it turned out to be a great place. Little did I know how much I would grow to appreciate Ames. So I worked at the clinic and started the ear, nose, and throat department there, and which eventually grew to 3 physicians. And then in 1999, I retired. So retirement, whether you know it or not, is an interesting phase in one person's life. You have to ask yourself, who are you when you're no longer who you used to be? And I spent a couple of years trying to figure out that, and I'm not sure I found out yet what it is for sure, but one of the ways I really found out I could continue to help people was to volunteer for different organizations, and I've spent the last 10 years volunteering for everything from the library board to youth and shelter services to I'm now on planning and zoning.
I guess I'll ask you a few questions, kind of more specific ones. One thing I was curious about is, as I'm sure you know, Ames has a 1% local option sales tax, and per state law, 60% must go to property tax relief, 40% to community betterment projects. Past councils have debated whether some of the 40% should be used to fund supplies and programs usually assumed to be a regular function of the city department, or the entire 40% should be used only for a new program or project. How do you think Ames should use its local option sales tax community betterment funds?
Well, I think the options are somewhat limited. They're supposed to go for community betterment. And on that particular issue, I don't think there's a lot of controversy with what the council has been doing recently. So I don't see any reason for a great deal of change in that area.
Okay. SciRide is running a $250,000 deficit on general service and about $17,000 to contract out service with Heartland Senior Services. Do you think it is essential for SciRide to offer citywide services, or how should SciRide handle the disparity between revenue and demand for service?
I'm not as familiar with that in planning and zoning, mainly because that's an issue the council discusses and I'm not familiar with that. But Heartland does need some help. They're struggling, and transportation is one of the areas that they're struggling in. I happen to be on asset now, which deals with all the different social service agencies that the county and the city, along with United Way, support. And so I know that those budget issues for SIRIDE services are going to be strained this year. It will be an interesting discussion at the council as to how that eventually unfolds.
Mhm. There's been a lot of comment in the last few years around elected officials representing all of their constituents and representing the people's will. What is your interpretation of these concepts and your philosophy about representing the citizens of Ames?
That's an interesting question because it has two different aspects to it. I struggle between whether, if elected, to be a representative of the people in Ward 4 that I would represent, or whether to be an individual recognizing all the facets and the different opinions of Ward 4, whether to do what's best for the city of Ames. And that's always a struggle I think every council member has. I would hope that I would continue to listen. You know, listening is part of what I've done my whole life. Diagnoses in medicine are not made by lab tests, they're made by listening to people and getting a perspective from that listening deal before you start ordering tests and all that sort of thing. So I would also hope to listen to my immediate constituency in Ward 4, have discussions with them, but somebody's got to eventually make a decision. And I think I'm capable of doing that with good conscience and with the interest of Ward 4 in mind.